The doors had not finished closing when the translator on my collar called my entire species dead. I stood in the center of the great round hall, under a ceiling so high that clouds drifted near the top of it. And the small machine pinned to my chest spoke for me in a voice meant to carry. It told 300 ancient delegates that a representative of an extinct people had arrived. The word it used was final, gone, finished. The kind of word you carve over a grave and never visit again. The machine had made that same error at every checkpoint on my way in, and each time it had landed a little heavier. Because each time the ones who heard it were a little more powerful, a little more able to make it true if they chose. A small machine calling you dead is a curiosity. 300 of the oldest beings in the galaxy hearing a machine call you dead, and nodding along because it matches what they already believe, is something closer to a sentence being read aloud a second time. I had decided long before I arrived that I would not flinch at it. Flinching was what they expected. It was, in a way, the whole reason they had felt safe forgetting us. I had come to be the one thing they had never once accounted for. The thing that did not flinch. I did not correct it, not yet. Sometimes the most useful thing you can do is let people believe what they have always believed. Right up until the moment it costs them everything. Getting into that hall had not been simple. There are 9 sealed gates between the edge of council space and the floor of the great hall, and each one is watched by guards who have stood their posts since before my world learned to write. I had passed through all 9 of them in a single day. At every gate the same thing happened. A guard would measure me, and the measurement would return an answer that made no sense, and the guard would go still, unsure whether to stop a thing its own instruments insisted did not exist. Doubt is a powerful key. I had used it to open every door between the border and this room. Now the doors had run out, and the doubt had run out with them, and there was nothing left between me and the rulers of the stars but the truth I had carried across the dark to give them. My name is Owen Brooks, and I had crossed a distance no living thing was supposed to cross to stand in that room. The hall belonged to the Galactic Council, the oldest seat of power in the known reaches of space. The delegates around me were beings who measured their lives in slow rivers of time. There were the Vol, tall creatures of living crystal who turned light into thought. There were the Sepher, soft clouds of glowing gas that floated inside clear tanks. There were the Quoth, who were not one mind but 10,000 small bodies thinking together as one. And there were 100 more, all of them older than my world, all of them certain that I was a ghost who had wandered in by mistake. A pair of chamber guards drifted toward me from the edges of the hall, slow and certain, the way you approach something you mean to remove without effort. They were Vol, smaller than the high speaker but still twice my height, their crystal bodies humming with a low light. One of them reached a long limb toward my shoulder. I would not, I said without turning to look at it. I have come a very long way to speak, and I am going to speak. You may remove me afterward if you still wish to, but I promise you that by the time I finish my first true sentence, removing me will be the last thing on your mind. The guard paused. It looked to the high seat for instruction. The creature in the high seat, curious in spite of itself, gave a slow pulse of light that meant wait. The limb drew back. I had bought myself a sentence, and I meant to make it worth the price. A heavy voice rolled down from the high seat at the front. It belonged to the one they called the High Speaker, a Vol named Vorin, whose body had grown so large over the ages that it filled a chamber of its own. Light moved through him in slow waves when he spoke. The record names no such delegation, Vorin said. Who sent you, small one? No one sent me, I said. I came on my own. A murmur passed around the ring of seats. They were not used to small things speaking for themselves. In their world you waited to be called, and you spoke only when an elder allowed it. I had not waited. I had walked through their front doors as if I had a right to them, because I did. Then state your origin, Vorin said, so the record may be corrected before you are removed. My origin is Earth, I said. The room went quiet in a way that quiet rooms rarely manage. It was not the silence of people who did not understand. It was the silence of people who understood far too well and wished they had not heard it. Earth. The word sat in the air like a stone dropped into still water. Most of them had never said it out loud. To them it was not a place. It was a lesson. A warning kept in old books to remind young races what happened when a species grew too fast and felt too much. I knew the lesson well. I had read it 1,000 times. 800,000 years ago, by the slow count of this hall, my people had been new to the stars. We had arrived loud and quick and full of feeling. We loved hard and we grieved harder, and we learned faster than anything the Council had ever seen. We won a single war we were never meant to survive, a war we did not start, and that frightened them more than losing would have. A young race that could not be beaten was a problem with no shelf to put it on. There is a detail of that day the council never wrote into its record, and I knew it only because we had pulled it out of the old transmissions long ago. On the day the verdict was read, one elder had asked whether it might be cleaner simply to end us outright rather than seal us away to a slow fading. The council voted against that, but not out of mercy. They voted against it because they did not want our ending on their record. They wanted us gone in a way that let them feel their hands stayed clean. So they chose the cage and the forgetting, and they told one another it was the gentle path. It was not gentle, it was only quiet. They had found a way to be rid of us that allowed them never to think of us again, and for a very long time it worked. So they voted. They called us a danger to the calm order of the galaxy. They said we were too violent, too brief, too restless to ever sit among the patient elders who guided the stars. They drew a line around our small corner of space and they sealed it. No travel lanes, no trade, no contact. They built a ring of silent markers around our system to keep us inside, and then they turned away and went back to their long, slow business. Sure that a caged and crowded people would fade out within 10,000 years. They were wrong about the time. They were wrong about almost everything. But the part they were most wrong about was the part they never thought to check. You claim to come from the sealed world, Vorin said at last. His light had gone still. That world has been silent for 600,000 years. We marked it as ended. The matter is closed. You marked it as ended, I agreed. You never went to look. A second voice cut in, sharper and quicker, from a tank near the floor where a Zephyr glowed a nervous shade of blue. Why would we look? Silence from a sealed cage means one thing. The thing inside the cage has stopped moving. Or, I said, the thing inside the cage stopped shouting at the walls. Because it had found something better to do with its time. I let that hang there. I am not a cruel man, but I had waited a very long time for this. And I will admit there was a small warmth in my chest watching the certainty drain out of their faces. You have grown bold for a ghost, Vorin said. I am not a ghost, I said, and I did not come here to argue about whether my people are alive. We are alive. I am standing in your hall. I came here for one reason. I came to tell you something, in person, because some things should not be delivered by a machine. And what is that? I opened my mouth to answer, and that was the exact moment the doors at the back of the hall flew open without anyone touching them. A young Quoth runner spilled into the room, its small bodies tumbling over one another in a panic that broke every rule of this calm place. The whole council turned to watch it. Runners did not run here. Nothing ran here. Hurry was a thing for short-lived creatures, and there were no short-lived creatures in this hall. Except me. The runner reached the foot of the high seat and forced its scattered voice into a single shaking word. A signal, the sealed sector. A signal is coming, it is moving toward us, and it is moving fast. For one long breath, no one in that ancient room remembered how to speak. 300 delegates who had ruled the stars for ages sat frozen, staring at a piece of news that did not fit inside any of their old, comfortable shelves. I turned back to Vorin, and I let the small warmth in my chest reach my face at last. That signal is not coming toward you, I said quietly. It already arrived. It arrived a long time ago. I am only the part of it that learned to knock first. How fast does it move? A delegate called from the upper seats, its voice climbing past the calm that ruled this place. The runner said it is fast. How fast? Faster than anything you have ever measured, I said. But speed is not the part that should trouble you. A fast thing can be tracked. A fast thing can be met at the border. What should trouble you is that the signal is not new at all. Your instruments are only noticing it now because we decided to let them. It has been sitting quietly inside your space for a very long time, waiting for the day we judged you ready to hear it. That day is today. We chose it. You did not. Sit with that part if you can. And as the great hall began for the first time in its endless history, to fill with the unfamiliar sound of fear, I sat back down in the giant's chair, folded my small human hands in my lap, and waited for them to finally ask me the question they had spent 800,000 years too proud to ask. What had we become? In all that time alone, I was going to enjoy telling them. The high speaker called for order, and order did not come. It is a strange thing to watch the powerful lose their footing. For ages these beings had never once needed to move quickly, and so they had forgotten how. Voices climbed over voices. The Zephyr flashed colors at one another through their tanks. The Quoth split into arguing clusters and then snapped back together. Vorin's slow light pulsed faster and faster, trying to gather a room that no longer wanted to be gathered. I simply waited. I had learned to wait in a way none of them could imagine, and I will tell you now how we learned it, because it is the center of everything that happened next. There was a kind of silence in that hall that I had never felt anywhere else. It was not the silence of an empty room. It was the silence of 300 minds that had each lived for ages, each so certain of its place in the order of things. All of them now turned toward a single small creature who had broken that order simply by existing. I could feel the weight of all those years pressing in on me, and I will tell you honestly that a younger version of my people might have crumbled under it. But I had not come alone, even though I stood there by myself. Behind me, far away in the dark, stood everyone who had ever lived and worked to put me in that chair. Every mind across 800,000 years that had carried the plan. Forward one step at a time. I was only the tip of a very long arm. The hand that mattered was somewhere else, and it did not tremble. When the council sealed our system, they expected us to break against the walls of our cage like water against stone. For a while, we did. The first 1,000 years inside the seal were hard ones. We had reached for the stars, and the stars had been taken away, and a people who had just learned to fly do not take kindly to being grounded. There was anger. There was grief. There were long, dark stretches where it seemed the elders might be proven right after all, that we might burn ourselves out inside our own small corner of the dark. But we did not burn out. We turned. We stopped looking up at the locked sky and started looking at the problem in front of us. And the problem in front of us was time. We were a quick people in a slow universe, and the elders had told us that was our great flaw. So we decided to fix it, not by becoming slow. We never became slow. We decided instead to become a people who could think across enormous stretches of time without ever losing the heat that made us human in the first place. It started small. A research station that passed its work, unbroken, from one generation to the next, so that no idea ever died with the mind that began it. Then a city that did the same. Then a whole world. We built ways to carry memory forward, clean and whole, so that a child born 10,000 years after a project began could pick up the exact thread her ancestor had set down and continue without missing a step. We learned to stretch a single human life across spans that would have seemed impossible to the people who first locked us in. And the strangest part, the part the elders would never have believed, is that we did it without going cold. We still loved hard. We still grieved hard. We just learned to do those things, while also holding a plan that would take 100,000 years to finish. The council had banished us for being brief. So we answered them by refusing to stay brief, and we did it on our own terms, in our own way, with our hearts still loud. I will give you one example, because numbers do not carry the weight of it. Early in our long isolation, a woman named Greta Lindqvist began a study of how to keep a single mind whole and clear across many lifetimes. She did not finish it. No one expected her to. She passed it to her students, and they passed it to theirs, and the work crossed more than 4,000 years and a great many generations before it was done. The mind that completed it had never met the mind that began it, and never could have, and yet she spoke of Greta as a partner, as someone she worked beside every day. That is the thing we built in the dark, not machines. A way of working together across time so deep that the long dead and the newly born labored side by side on the same problem, and neither of them ever felt alone. You called us brief. We answered by making a single piece of work outlast 100 of your laws, and never once letting it grow cold in all that time. By the time the hall in front of me had quieted enough for Voron to be heard again, I had already decided how much of this to tell them, and how slowly. You will be removed, Voron said, though his voice had lost some of its certainty. And the sealed sector will be examined. If a signal has truly crossed our border, the breach will be studied and the cause will be contained. You are still speaking as if you are in charge of this, I said. I am the High Speaker of the Galactic Council. You are the High Speaker of a council that has not looked at my people in 600,000 years, I said. And in that time we have looked at you every single day. That stopped him. Explain, he said, so I did. The ring of markers you built around our system, I said. The silent fence you wrapped around our cage. You were very proud of it, I am sure. It was clever work for its time. But here is something you never considered, because you never imagined we would still be alive to do it. We took your fence apart. We did it slowly, over many lifetimes, the way we do everything now. And once we understood how it worked, we did not destroy it. Why would we? A fence that listens in both directions is far too useful to break. A cold ripple ran through the seated delegates. You see, I went on. Your markers did not only keep us in, they were tied into your own network. Every world, every meeting hall, every quiet message you sent between the stars. The moment we understood the fence, we understood all of it. And so for 400,000 years, we have sat in our corner of the dark, and we have listened to you. Every session of this council, every vote, Every secret you buried so that the younger races would not lose faith in you. That is not possible, the blue Zephyr said, though its color had gone pale and thin. It is not only possible, I said, it is finished. It has been finished for ages. We know about the famine you hid on the third Quoth colony and let pass without aid, because helping would have upset a trade you valued. We know about the 2 elder species that quietly died out while this council debated whether their troubles were worth the disruption of acting. We know about the vote you took, 200,000 years ago, to stop searching for new life entirely, because new life is unpredictable and unpredictable things frighten you. I could go on. I have a great deal of time. We made sure of that. A Quoth cluster near the center of the hall came apart all at once, its small bodies scattering across its bench in open distress, and then forcing themselves back together with great effort. The third colony famine, it said, and its joined voice shook. That record was sealed. Only 9 delegates ever knew the truth of it. 3 of those 9 are in this room. You could not say what you have just said unless you heard it from inside this hall. I heard it from inside this hall, I agreed. I heard the vote. I heard the 3 of you who knew argue that sending aid would disrupt a grain route you valued more than a colony of your own kind. I heard you decide that a quiet ending on a distant world was a smaller cost than a disruption to trade. I have heard every word this hall has spoken for 400,000 years. I am not telling you this to wound you. I am telling you so that you understand there is nothing left in the dark for you to keep. I have already seen all of it. The 3 delegates who had known did not speak. There was nothing they could say. To deny it was to be caught lying in front of everyone. To admit it was to be caught in the older thing. So they sat, exposed, in a silence that did more for my cause than any argument I could have made. The hall did not erupt this time. It did something far worse for them. It went still and small and quiet, the way a room goes still when everyone in it realizes at the same moment that they have been seen, fully, for a very long time, by someone they thought was dead. You spent 800,000 years certain we could never reach you, I said. And in all that time, not one of you ever stopped to ask the only question that mattered. You never asked why we stopped trying to break out. Voran's light had gone almost dark. Why, he said, did you stop? Because breaking out stopped being the point, I said. Once we could hear you, once we could see exactly how this galaxy was being run, leaving the cage was no longer about freedom. It became about something much larger. It became about whether we should let you keep steering at all. A new voice rose then, careful and cold, from a vole seated close to the high seat. This one had not panicked like the others. This one had been thinking, looking for the crack in what I had said, the way clever and frightened people do. You make a grand claim, it said. You say you have heard everything, for ages. But hearing is not the same as understanding. A child can sit beside a master and hear every word and learn nothing. So tell me, small one, since you have listened so long, what is the true name of the law that sealed your world? Not the name in the public record. The name we use among ourselves. It thought it had me. It thought the truth of our long listening would crack on a single hidden detail, and that the crack would let them call me a liar and breathe again. You call it among yourselves the mercy of distance, I said. Because you told one another that putting space between you and a troublesome thing was kinder than facing it. I have always found that name to be the most honest thing this council ever produced, because it admits, right there in the word mercy, that you knew it was not kind at all. You needed to call it mercy so that you could live with it. I have heard you use that name in this hall more times than I can count. Would you like me to tell you which of you uses it most? The clever vole did not answer. Its light dimmed and it sat back, and it did not try to trap me again. It had reached for the one stone it was sure I could not lift, and watched me lift it without effort, and now it understood, as the others were beginning to understand, that there was no stone in this hall I had not already weighed in the dark. I rose from the giant's chair, and stood on my own 2 feet in the middle of that ancient hall, a single small human surrounded by the rulers of the stars, and I felt no fear at all, because fear had moved across the room and settled into them instead. I did not come here to ask you to let us back in, I said. I want to be very clear about that, so there is no misunderstanding. We are not knocking on your door, hoping you will open it. We do not need your permission to exist. We never did, and we certainly do not now. I came here to inform you of a decision my people have already made. The signal that frightened your runner is not a request. It is a notice. A notice of what? Voran asked, and for the first time his voice was simply a question, with no weight of command behind it at all. That is the part, I said, where you are going to have to be patient. And I understand patience is something you believe you are very good at. So let me tell you what real patience looks like. The kind we learned in the dark while you forgot we were there. I walked a slow circle in the center of the hall, meeting as many of their strange eyes as I could. You think patience is waiting, I said. It is not. Waiting is what you do. You wait for problems to solve themselves. You wait for difficult things to become someone else's trouble. You wait so long and so well that you have mistaken stillness for wisdom. That is not patience. That is fear wearing a slow coat. A few of the delegates stirred at that, but none of them argued because none of them could. Real patience, I said, is holding a single purpose steady across more time than a mind was ever built to hold, and never once letting it go cold. It is starting work you know you will not live to finish, and doing it with the same care as if you would. It is choosing, every single day for thousands of years, to keep caring about something. That is what we built down there in the dark you forgot about. Not a weapon, not a fleet, a people who can want one thing together, for longer than your oldest law has been written, and still mean it as fiercely on the last day as on the first. I stopped walking. And do you want to know the most frightening part for you? I asked. It is not that we are powerful. Power, you understand. You have always understood power. The frightening part is that for 400,000 years, the one thing we have wanted, steadily and without ever letting it cool, is to do better than you. To prove that the verdict you carved over our grave was a lie, not by destroying you. That would only prove you right about us. By outliving the small thing you decided we were, and becoming something you cannot explain. Voran's voice was very quiet now. And the signal, he said. What does the notice say? The notice does not say anything, I said. The notice is a set of locations. When your people translate it, and they will very soon, they are going to find that it points to a great many places at once. And they are going to be confused, because the places it points to are not far away at all. They are going to find that the signal is pointing here and there, and to your home worlds, and to 100 quiet moons you stopped watching ages ago. Why, Voran breathed, would your signal point to our own worlds? I looked up at the great crystal elder, and I gave him the truest answer I had. Because we are already there, I said. We have been there for a very long time. And you never once noticed. Then the doors opened a second time, and a different runner entered, and this one was not afraid. This one was calm and steady, and walked with the slow sureness of someone who had all the time in the world, because she was one of mine. Her name was Clara Bennett, and she had been waiting outside that hall for 3 of their days, and she carried in her hands the proof of everything I had just said. Clara Bennett was not, as the council would have guessed, a soldier or a guard. She was a keeper of the long record, one of the people whose whole life was given to holding our history clear and unbroken, so that nothing we had learned was ever lost. She knew more about what had happened in this hall over the last 400,000 years than any delegate seated in it, because she had spent her life studying the very transmissions we had pulled from their fence. If I was the voice my people had sent, she was the memory, and the memory does not get nervous. The memory simply knows. She crossed the floor of that ancient hall as if she had walked it 1,000 times, which in a sense she had. In every recording she had ever studied, she did not bow, she did not slow. She came to stand at my side and turned to face the rulers of the stars, with the calm of someone reading a page she had read many times before, and found no surprises in. To the delegates, 2 small humans standing together in the center of their hall must have looked like almost nothing at all. That was the part they kept getting wrong. They kept measuring us by our size. The runner who entered second did not tumble or panic. She walked into the great hall the way you walk into a room you have already measured, and she crossed to my side without once glancing at the rulers of the stars seated all around her. They have decoded the signal, Clara said to me, in our own tongue, soft enough that the Astrazalers caught only pieces. Voran's analysts cracked it an hour ago. They are still pretending they have not, because they do not know what to do with the answer. I know, I said. Let them pretend a little longer. It is the last thing they will get to control. I turned back to the council. 300 faces, if you could call them faces, were fixed on the 2 small smiles humans standing in the middle of their oldest seat of power. And I could see the change happening in them. An hour ago I had been a ghost, a curiosity, a clerical error to be filed and forgotten. Now I was something they had no word for, and the not having a word for it was eating at them more than any threat could have. Allow me to save your analysts the trouble of lying to you, I said. The signal points to your worlds because we did not arrive today. We arrived a long time ago, quietly, in pieces. We have been living in the dead spaces of your galaxy for longer than your youngest delegates have been alive. On the moons you abandoned. In the dark stretches between your trade lanes that you stopped patrolling. Because nothing ever happened there. In the deep places of systems you long ago decided were empty. We were the nothing that happened there. We were the empty. A quoth cluster near the front broke apart and reformed, which was how they showed distress. You speak of an invasion, it said. No, I said. And I said it firmly, because this was the heart of it and I needed them to hear it correctly. I have used no such word, and I will not, because it would be a lie. We did not come to take your worlds. We have no interest in your worlds. We came. We settled in the gaps you were not using, and we did no harm to a single one of you. In all the time we have lived among you, not one of you was hurt. Not one of your cities was touched. Not one of your people lost a thing to us. We were simply there, neighbors who never knocked. Because we had learned long ago that you do not open the door to people you have decided are dead. Then why reveal yourselves now? Vorin asked. If you wished only to live in our shadows, you could have stayed there. Why send the signal? Why come to this hall and frighten an old man into asking questions he does not want answered? It was, I will admit, a good question, and I gave him the true reason. Because the true reason was the only thing that would make him understand what came next. Because something is coming, I said, that none of you are willing to face, and we are tired of watching you not face it. I want to be careful here, because this is the part people most often misunderstand when the story is told. We did not reveal ourselves because we were lonely, or because we wanted to be seen, or because 800,000 years of silence had finally grown too heavy. We had made peace with the silence long ago. We revealed ourselves because we had reached a fork that we could not walk past, and the fork was this. There was a thing coming that would unmake a great part of the galaxy. We had the means to slow it, and we had to decide, as a people, whether the lives in the path of that unmaking were worth the cost of stepping out of the dark to save them. To save them, we would have to show ourselves. To show ourselves, we would have to walk into this hall and stand in front of the very beings who had thrown us away. It was not a small thing to ask of ourselves. Some of us did not want to do it. But in the end we decided that a people who could save lives and chose not to, simply to avoid the discomfort of facing an old wound, would be a smaller people than we wished to be. So here I was, discomfort and all. That changed the air in the room again. The fear they had been feeling was the small, sharp fear of being caught. This was a different fear, a colder one, and it crept in slowly as I went on. Your analysts know about the expansion, I said. I know they do, because we have watched them measure it for the last 60,000 years. The far edge of this galaxy is not behaving the way the old laws say it should. Space itself is stretching out there faster than it should, faster every century, and the edge of that stretching is moving inward, slowly by your count, steadily by any count. It pulls worlds apart. It thins the space between stars until the stars themselves drift out of reach of one another. It is not a storm you can shelter from. It is the floor of the galaxy being pulled out from under you, one quiet region at a time. I have stood on a world that the edge had already reached. I went on, and the hall grew very still, because they could hear that this was not a thing I had read in a record, but a thing I had seen with my own eyes. It was a world far out near the rim, abandoned long before any of you were born. And we went to it to measure the unmaking up close. The sky there was wrong. The stars that should have hung close and bright had drifted so far apart that the night was nearly empty. Just a few cold points scattered across an enormous dark. The ground was still there. The air was still there. But the world was alone in a way no world is meant to be alone. Cut off from every neighbor by a gulf that grows wider every year and can never be crossed again. That is what the edge leaves behind. Not ruins, not ashes, just distance, endless, growing patient distance, until every star is an island and no island can ever reach another. That is the future your stillness is steering toward. I have walked in it. I did not enjoy the visit. No one argued. That was how I knew I had it right. If I had been wrong, they would have rushed to correct me, because correcting a small human would have felt good. Their silence was the loudest confirmation I could have asked for. You have known for 60,000 years, I said, and in 60,000 years this council has voted on the matter 40 times. I know, because we listened to all 40 votes, and 40 times you chose to do nothing. You called it prudence. You called it the long view. You told yourselves that acting against something so large would disrupt the order of things, would frighten the younger races, would require changes to the way the galaxy is run that you were not prepared to make. So you measured it, and you debated it, and you measured it again, and you let another 1,000 years go by, and another, and the edge crept closer, and you called your stillness wisdom. What would you have had us do? The blue Zephyr demanded, and there was real anguish in its flickering now. The thing you describe is the unmaking of space itself. There is nothing to fight. There is no enemy. There is no shelter. To act is only to fail loudly instead of quietly. And here at last, I gave them the thing I had carried across all that distance to deliver. That, I said gently, is exactly the difference between you and us. You looked at a problem too large to solve and decided that meant it was not worth trying. We looked at the same problem for the same 60,000 years, and we decided something else entirely. We decided that a problem you cannot finish is still a problem worth working on. We have been working on it, quietly, in the gaps, while you debated. I let Clara step forward then, and she lifted her hands and opened the small device she carried, and a soft light spilled out of it into the air above us, and it formed a shape. It was the galaxy turning slowly, the great wheel of stars they all knew so well. But across its far edge, where the expansion was eating inward, there was a thin line, a faint, glowing seam drawn in light, holding the edge in place. It was not finished. Great stretches of it were only sketched in, marked as plans not yet built. But it was real, and it was vast, and it was unmistakably the work of a people who thought in spans of 100,000 years. The hall made a sound I had not heard from it yet, not fear this time and not anger. Something closer to awe, the low collective breath of beings, looking at a scale of work they had believed only they could attempt, and finding it had been attempted by the people they had called incapable. The light of the turning galaxy moved across their strange faces, and for a moment even the coldest of them simply looked. Clara spoke then for the first time, and her voice was quiet and even and carried to every seat without effort. Each thread of the seam you see is held in place by 10,000 stations, she said, and each station is tended without pause by minds that hand the work down through their children. The oldest part of it, the part nearest the center, has been holding for 60,000 years without a single failure. We did not build it quickly. We could not. We built it the way water shapes stone, a little at a time, never stopping, never once forgetting why we began. What you are looking at is not a machine. It is a promise, kept across more time than your council has existed. A zephyr near the front glowed a deep, trembling violet. We were told, it said slowly, that your kind could not hold a single purpose past one short life. That this was the reason you could not be trusted with the steering of anything. And you have held this purpose for 60,000 years. Yes, Clara said simply, we have. The zephyr said nothing more. It did not need to. The light of the seam was answer enough, and it had just rewritten everything that creature had been taught about us in a single, quiet moment. We cannot stop the expansion, I said into the silence. I will not pretend we can. No one can. But we have learned over a very long time how to hold a seam against it, how to knit the space at the edge back together faster than it comes apart, how to slow the unmaking to a crawl, and then perhaps in time to a stop. We have been building this for 60,000 years. It is perhaps a tenth finished. At our current speed, alone, it will be done in roughly 600,000 more. 600,000 years, Vorin repeated, and his light moved strangely. By which time, I said, the edge will have eaten through a quarter of your worlds, including, by our best measure, 4 of the 7 home worlds of the species seated in this hall. Yours among them, High Speaker. For a moment no one in the hall breathed. It is one thing to hear of a distant danger spoken of in numbers. It is another to be told plainly that your own home, the world your kind had risen on, the place every law and every memory of your people pointed back to, sat squarely in the path of an ending you had chosen for 60,000 years to ignore. I watched that knowledge move through them like a cold current. Even the old guard, who trusted nothing I said, could not pretend they had not done the same math in private and arrived at the same answer. The difference was that they had buried it. I had simply said it out loud in the open, where it could no longer be buried again. I closed my hand and Clara closed the device, and the turning galaxy and its thin bright seam folded back into the dark. We can save them, I said. Or rather, we can save them faster. Fast enough to matter, instead of fast enough to be a story told after they are gone. But not alone. Alone we are a tenth finished and slowing, because the work grows harder the further out it reaches. With your worlds, your resources, your hands beside ours, the seam could be closed in time. Your home survives. Your younger races survive. The galaxy stays a place where stars can still reach one another. A hard voice cut across the awe in the room, and it came from one of the oldest Vol of all, seated high and to the side, its crystal gone dark with age. And what do you take in return? It demanded. You did not cross all this distance after all this time, to give us a gift and ask for nothing. No one does that, so speak the price plainly. You wish to rule. You wish to take the steering you say we have done so poorly. You wish to sit where we sit and call it rescue. That is the true shape of this, is it not? You have built a thing we need, and now you will use our need to make us yours. It was, I think, the most honest thing the old guard of the council could say. because it was the only way they knew how to think. In their world, no one helped without taking. Power was the only language they trusted, and so they assumed it was the only language anyone spoke. You believe that, I said, because you cannot imagine doing otherwise. That is not an insult. It is simply true. You have ruled so long that you have forgotten there is any reason to act besides holding power. So let me tell you what we take in return, and you may decide whether to believe me. We take nothing. We do not want your seats. We do not want your counsel. We do not want to steer your worlds, because we have learned, in 800,000 years, that steering other people's worlds is a poison that turns even good intentions cruel. And we have watched it turn yours cruel from the inside. We will help you close the seam, and then we will go back to living in the gaps, as your neighbors, as we have all along. The only thing we ask is the one thing I named already, that you admit, out loud, that the verdict was wrong, not because we need to hear it, because you need to say it, before you can ever do better. I looked around the hall one final time, and I let them sit with the full weight of where they had arrived. And here is the part you will find hardest to swallow, I said. So I will say it plainly and let you choke on it at your own pace. You banished us because you decided we were not fit to help steer this galaxy. You carved that judgment in stone and you sealed us away from the stars. And now the only thing standing between your homeworlds and the dark is the very people you threw out. We do not need you to survive this. We have already saved ourselves. Our seam protects our own corner first. We could finish that piece, retreat behind it, and watch the rest of this galaxy come apart without ever lifting another hand. The math says we should. It would be faster. It would be safer. It would cost us nothing. Then why, Vorin asked very quietly, are you offering otherwise? I did not answer right away. It is not a simple thing to explain, even to your own kind, why you would reach back toward people who once decided you were better off dead. But I had thought about it for a long time, and I had an answer, and it was true. Because if we let you come apart, I said, after everything we have built, after everything we have become, then the people you banished 800,000 years ago would finally, at the very end, become exactly the small and heartless thing you accused us of being. And we did not spend all this time, all this care, all this love held steady across the dark, to prove your verdict right on the last day. I sat back down in the giant's chair. So that is the notice, I said. Not a threat, an offer. The offer is this. Admit in this hall in front of every species you rule that the banishment was the largest mistake this council ever made. And then ask us, properly, the way you should have asked an equal 800,000 years ago, to help you save your home. The hall was utterly silent. Take your time, I added, and I folded my hands. I am told you are very good at that, and as it happens, so are we. They did not arrest me in the end. They had meant to. I could see it in the way the chamber guards shifted at the edges of the hall when I sat back down. An hour earlier, arresting me would have felt like the natural answer, the way it always had been the natural answer for this council to contain a thing it did not understand. But too much had changed in that hour. You do not put restraints on a person who has just told you calmly that he could let your home world come apart and chooses not to. Restraints would have looked like exactly what they were, a child's grab at a thing already far beyond its reach. So instead they called a recess, which is the polite word powerful people use when they need to go somewhere private and be afraid where no one can see them. Clara and I were given a waiting chamber. It was a beautiful room, all curved stone and slow-moving light, built for delegates who would sit in it for years at a stretch, while a single vote crept toward its conclusion. We had been in it for less than a day when the door opened and Vorin came in alone. While we waited, Clara had kept her ear on the soft channels that ran through the building. The same channels we had been listening to for 400,000 years, and she told me what was happening behind the closed doors of the council. They are split 3 ways, she said. Let's raceaways want to accept at once. They have done the math themselves, and they can see their worlds in the path. The middle delegates are frightened of you, and frightened of the edge in equal measure. And they cannot decide which fear is larger. And the old guard is not debating the offer at all. They are debating how to make us disappear. Of course they are, I said. 2 of them have proposed sealing this hall and the chambers around it, Clara went on, calm as ever, and declaring our visit a deception, a trick played by some lesser race wearing the name of a dead one. They believe that if they can simply remove us and burn the record of this day, the whole thing can be forgotten, the way they forgot us the first time. They believe that, I said, because forgetting is the only tool they have ever needed. It worked once. Why would it not work again? I was not worried. I want to be clear about that. We had known before I ever set foot in the hall that the old guard would reach for the eraser, because erasing was the shape of every choice they had made for an age. We had simply made sure, long before this day, that there was nothing left for them to erase. The truth of who we were was already sitting on every world they ruled, in the gaps, waiting. They could remove me. They could not remove us. That was the whole reason I had been able to walk in unafraid. So we sat in the beautiful waiting chamber and let the old guard plot their erasure, and I felt no urge to stop them. There is a strange peace in watching people reach for a weapon you disarmed long ago. Clara closed her eyes and listened to the soft channels, and I watched the slow light move across the curved stone walls, and we waited, in the patient way we had learned in the dark, for the galaxy to finish deciding what it wished to become. That told me everything. The High Speaker of the Galactic Council did not travel alone. He did not go anywhere without attendants and record keepers and the careful weight of his office around him. But he came to us with none of it, his great crystal body filling the doorway, his light dimmed low. "I wish to speak without the hall," he said. "I thought you might," I said. He was quiet for a long moment, and his light moved in slow, troubled waves. "I have lived a very long time," he said at last. "Longer than your entire species existed before we sealed it away. I sat in that hall on the day the verdict was read. I was young then, by the count of my kind. I did not speak against it. I want you to know that I have remembered that silence every day since, though I told myself for a long time that there was nothing to remember." He was quiet again, and then he told me the thing he had carried, and I understood that he had come not only to speak with me, but to set down a weight he had held longer than my species had been alive. "There was a delegate of your kind in the hall that day," he said. "Did you know that? Before the seal was made final, your people were given a single voice to speak in their own defense. She was young, even by your brief measure, and she stood where you stood, in a chair built too large for her, exactly as you stood today, and she did not beg. That is what I have remembered all this time. We expected begging. We were ready for it. We had hardened ourselves against it. Instead, she looked at us, this small, short-lived creature surrounded by the oldest powers in the galaxy, and she said that we were making a mistake we would not understand for a very long time. She said that we feared her people, not because they were dangerous but because they were new, and that a galaxy that throws away everything new will, in the end, have nothing left but its own slow ending. And then she sat down and we voted and we sealed her world, and I said nothing." His light had gone very low. "I have thought about her every age since," he said. "I did not know her name. We did not record it. We were careful not to. And today another small creature walked into the same hall and sat in the same oversized chair and told us, in almost the same words, the same thing she told us. Except this time you did not warn us of a mistake we would make. You showed us the mistake already made, 800,000 years deep, with the proof of it glowing in the air above your head. She was right. She was right the whole time, and we sealed her away for it. And I have lived this long only to find out exactly how right she was. I did not tell him her name. I knew it. We had never lost it. But I understood in that moment that the not knowing was part of his punishment, and that giving it to him would have been a mercy he had not earned yet. So I let him sit with the nameless memory a little longer, the way he had let her sit nameless in the record for an age. I had not expected that. I had prepared for anger, for bargaining, for the slow cold maneuvering of an old power trying to find an angle. I had not prepared for an old creature coming quietly to confess. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked. "Because I need to understand the thing my council cannot," Vorin said. "You showed us the scene. You showed us the offer. You explained the cost and the choice, and the hall heard all of it. But the hall is still debating whether to believe you. They are picking at the numbers. They are wondering if it is a trick. They will spend a year on it, or 10. And we do not have 10 years to spare. Not really. Not when the edge moves the way it does. So I came to ask you the one thing that will tell me whether to believe you, away from the hall, where you have no audience to perform for. Ask. You said you could retreat behind your own seam and survive," he said. "You said the math favored it. You said helping us cost you, and saves you nothing. I believe that part. I have run it myself. So I am not going to ask you whether you can help us. I am going to ask you why a people we threw into the dark and left for dead would even consider. And I want the true reason, Owen Brooks. Not the fine words you used for the hall, the real one. The one you would only say to someone who already knows he was wrong." I was quiet for a while. Clara watched me, because she knew this was the question that mattered, the one the entire mission had always been built to answer, and she knew I had never been fully sure how to answer it even to myself. "When you sealed us in," I said slowly, "the first thing we lost was not the stars. We could live without the stars, it turned out. The first thing we lost was the belief that we mattered to anyone but ourselves. You did not just lock us up. You told a whole galaxy that we were a danger, a mistake, a lesson. And then you forgot us so completely that you did not even check whether the lesson had ended. Do you understand what that does to a people? To know that the oldest powers in existence looked at you, decided you were nothing, and were so sure of it that they never glanced your way again? Voron's light had gone very still. For a long time that knowledge nearly broke us. I said, it is a heavy thing, being treated as nothing. Some of our people wanted to answer it the way you would expect. They wanted to grow strong in the dark, and come back and make you feel as small as you had made us feel. For a few thousand years, that was a real argument among us, maybe the loudest one we ever had. What stopped it, I said. We thought it through, across more lifetimes than I can count, and we realized something. If we came back to make you feel small, then you would have been right about us all along. We would have proven, with our own hands, that we really were the violent, dangerous, restless thing you locked away. The only way to truly prove the verdict wrong was to become something the verdict could not survive. Not stronger than you, better than you. The kind of people who, when they finally hold every advantage, when the math says walk away and let the old powers fall, choose instead to reach back toward the ones who wronged them, and help, and ask for nothing. I met his light directly. That is the real reason, High Speaker. We are not offering to save your homeworlds because we forgive you. I want to be honest about that. Most of us have not forgiven you, and some of us never will, and I am not sure forgiveness is even mine to give on their behalf. We are offering because the people you banished decided, a very long time ago, that we would rather be the kind of people who help than be proven right about being the kind of people who do not. The offer is not for you. It never was. It is for us. It is the last and largest way we have of telling that old verdict that it was a lie. Voron was silent for a long, long time. When he finally spoke, his voice had changed. The weight of office had gone out of it entirely. You have done the thing we always told ourselves was impossible, he said. You have held a purpose steady across an age, without letting it turn cold or cruel. We told the galaxy that no short-lived, hot-blooded people could ever do that it was the reason you could not be trusted to steer. We were so certain. His light flickered, low and sad. And the truth is that we could not do it either. We mistook our slowness for steadiness. We sat still for 60,000 years in front of the unmaking of our own home, and we called our fear by the name of patience, because patience was the one virtue we were sure we owned and you could not. You have just taken even that from us. The only thing left to do with that knowledge is to be ashamed of it, or to act on it. Those are the two choices, I agreed. Then I will tell you what I am going to do, Voron said, and you may decide whether it is enough. I am going to return to that hall, and I am not going to argue for caution, or for study, or for another year of picking at your numbers. I am going to stand before 300 delegates who have never in their lives heard me admit an error, and I am going to say that the banishment of your people was the gravest mistake this council ever made, and that the only thing more shameful than making it would be to let pride keep us from undoing it, now that we know the truth. And then I am going to ask you, as an equal the way I should have 800,000 years ago, to help us save what can still be saved. I rose from my seat. Then I will be in the hall to hear it, I said. There is one more thing, Voron said. You should know that if I do this, I will not survive it as High Speaker. My kind do not forgive a leader who admits the whole of our history was built on a wrong we never corrected. I will be removed. Perhaps worse, in the slow way my people manage these things. I am telling you this so that you understand the price, and so that you do not mistake my offer for an easy one. That stopped me. I had come prepared for an old power protecting itself. I had not come prepared for an old creature choosing to fall on purpose, in front of everyone, because it was the right thing to do. Then why do it? I asked. His light steadied, and for just a moment it was almost warm. Because 800,000 years ago, a young vole sat in that hall and said nothing while a great wrong was done, he said. And he has carried that silence every day since. He does not get to undo it, but he gets to do this, and he finds now that the moment has come, that he would rather end as the one who finally spoke than continue as the one who never did. He turned toward the door. Then he paused. You called it the largest mistake this council ever made, he said. Letting you back in. But that was never the mistake, was it? I have understood that, since you spoke in the hall, the mistake was never that you came back. The mistake was that we made you leave it all. Everything good that this galaxy might have been, for 800,000 years, was waiting in the dark we sealed shut, and we will never know what we lost, because we threw it away before it had even begun. That is the regret, not your return. our exile of you, and I will carry it for whatever time I have left." He left to go and end his own long reign with the truth. The old guard made their move while he walked back to the hall. Clara heard it first, the soft channels lighting up with sealed orders. 2 of the oldest delegates had given the command to lock the chambers and cut every link between this building and the wider galaxy, so that whatever happened next would happen where no one could see it, and could later be told however they wished it told. The locks closed, the links went dark, and nothing changed at all. "Sealed the hall," Clara said, and there was the faintest edge of something almost like amusement in her steady voice. "They believe they have just cut us off from our people. Let them believe it," I said. What the old guard did not know, what they could not have known, was that the links they had just cut were links they had built, on a network we had mapped completely 400,000 years before. Cutting us off from the galaxy through their network was like a man locking his front door against the wind while every window in the house stood open. We did not need their links. We had never needed them. Every word spoke in that sealed hall was already reaching our people through paths old guard did not know existed and would not have understood if I had drawn them a picture. They had reached, one final time, for the only tool they trusted, the power to control what others could see and know. And they found, as they were about to find in every part of this, that the tool had stopped working on us a very long time ago. Clara turned to me when the door had closed. "Do you think the hall will follow him?" "I do not know," I said. "But for the first time in 800,000 years, an elder of the council is about to tell the truth out loud, on purpose, knowing what it will cost him. Whatever happens after that, I think we have already won the only thing we came here to win, which is..." I looked at the closed door where the old creature had gone. "Proof," I said, "that we were never the danger. We were the help they threw away. And now, finally, one of them knows it." Vorin kept his word, and it cost him exactly what he said it would. I was in the hall when he did it. He stood before the 300, and he did not soften a single word. He told them the banishment had been the gravest error in the Council's history. He told them their stillness in the face of the expansion had been fear, wearing the costume of wisdom. He told them that the people they had thrown into the dark had become greater than the Council had ever been, and had returned not to take but to help, and that the only thing more shameful than the original wrong would be to let pride stop them from undoing it. And then, in front of everyone, the High Speaker of the Galactic Council turned to a small human standing in a chair built for a giant, and he asked me, as an equal, to help save his home. His own people removed him from his seat before the day was over. They did it slowly and quietly, the way his kind did everything, but they did it. The creature who had ruled the stars for an age ended that day as an ordinary delegate, stripped of his high seat, because he had told the truth, and the truth was unbearable to those who had spent their lives avoiding it. But here is the thing the ones who removed him did not understand. By the time they pulled him down, it was already too late to matter, because the younger races had heard him. The Quoth, who remembered the famine on their third colony that the Council had let pass. The Sephir, whose homeworld sat directly in the path of the unmaking edge. 100 smaller species who had spent their entire histories being told to wait, to be patient, to trust the slow wisdom of the elders, and who had just watched the oldest elder of all confess that the slow wisdom had been fear the entire time. The vote to accept our offer did not pass because the old powers willed it. It passed because, for the first time in the Council's history, the young refused to wait any longer. They had seen the seam in the light, they had seen the math, and they had seen an old crystal giant fall on purpose to tell them the truth. After that, no amount of careful debate from the remaining elders could hold them. I remember the moment the tide turned, because it did not come from a speech. It came from a single small Sephir, a delegate of a young race that had never once spoken out of turn in the whole of its history. When the old guard tried to call for another period of study, another careful pause to weigh the matter across the coming centuries, this small delegate floated up in its tank and said, in a voice that shook with the effort of breaking a rule its whole life had taught it to keep, that it would not wait. Its world sat in the path of the edge, that it had watched the High Speaker himself fall on purpose to tell the truth, and that if an elder of 10,000 years could find the courage to say he had been wrong, then a young delegate could surely find the courage to refuse to wait while its home came apart. And then another young voice joined it, and another. The races that had spent their entire existence being told to be patient, to trust the slow wisdom of their betters, all of them rose at once, and the rising could not be stopped, because it was not built on power. It was built on the simple fact that they had finally seen, with their own eyes, that the patience they had been sold was fear in a fine coat, and that they were done buying it. The old guard had ruled for an age by being the only ones brave enough to act. In a single afternoon, they discovered they were now the only ones too afraid to. The decree of banishment was repealed by a margin so large that the elders who opposed it stopped objecting halfway through, because objecting only made their smallness more visible. 800,000 years of judgment, undone in an afternoon because one creature chose to speak and a generation chose to listen. And then the real work began. I will not pretend the work was simple, or that the two halves of the galaxy fell into each other's arms the moment the vote was counted. They did not. We were strange to them and they were strange to us, and 800,000 years of being treated as dead does not wash out of a people in a single season. There were arguments. There were elders who would not look at us, who served on the joint effort with their faces turned away, who never once said the word sorry and never would. We let them keep their pride. We had not come back for apologies. We had come back to close a seam, and close it we did, though not the way either side expected. The elders thought the work would go the way all their work went, slow and measured and careful, every step studied for 100 years before the next was taken. And our people thought it would go the way our work had always gone, steady and patient across the long dark. What neither side expected was what happened when you put the two together. It was the Sephir who first saw it. Their homeworld was closest to the edge, and so they had the most to lose and the most reason to push. They came to me, perhaps 1,000 years into the joint work, and one of them said something I have never forgotten. We always believed your great gift was patience, it said, glowing a careful gold. The thing we said you lacked, and then learned you had mastered better than we ever did. But we were wrong about that too. Patience is not your gift. We have patience. We have always had patience. Your gift is the other thing, the thing we've lost. And what is that? I asked. Urgency, it said. You can hold a purpose for 100,000 years, yes. But you can also decide in a single afternoon to risk everything on a thing that might not work, because the cost of waiting is worse than the cost of being wrong. We forgot how to do that. We grew so afraid of being wrong that we stopped being able to act at all. You never forgot. You can hold the long view and the urgent moment at the same time, in the same breath, and that is the thing we could never do. And it is the thing that is going to save my world. It was right. That was the engine of the whole thing, in the end. The elders brought their vast resources and their deep, careful knowledge. We brought the willingness to gamble, to try the bold thing, to decide and move and adjust rather than study a problem until the problem had eaten us. Apart, the elders had stalled for 60,000 years, and our people had crept along at 1/10 of the needed speed. Together, the seam that should have taken 600,000 more years to finish was closed in just over 40,000. There was one moment in all that long work when it nearly came apart, and I tell it because it shows, better than anything, why the two halves of the galaxy needed each other. About 19,000 years into the joint effort, the edge of the unmaking surged without warning in a region the old calculations had marked as safe. A long stretch of the seam, the work of 1,000 generations, began to give way, and behind it sat two inhabited worlds with no time to be emptied. The elders did exactly what their nature told them to do. They called for a careful study of the surge, a measured response built over the coming decades. Every step weighed before the next was taken. It was the right answer for a problem with time to spare. It was the wrong answer for a problem measured in days. So our people did the thing the elders could not. We gambled. A young engineer named Ruth Calloway proposed pouring the unfinished strength of 3 other sections of the seam into the failing one, all at once. A thing that had never been tried and might have torn the whole nearby structure apart if she had judged it wrong. The elders were appalled. It broke every rule of careful work they held sacred. But there was no time for careful work, and Ruth knew it, and she made the call in an afternoon, the way our people had always made the calls that mattered. The seam held, the two worlds lived, and the elders, who had been ready to study the surge until the worlds beneath it were gone, finally understood, in a way no speech could have taught them, what the difference between us truly was. It was not that we were braver. It was that we had never let ourselves forget that some problems do not wait for the patient. I did not live to see the last stretch of it completed. Even with everything we had learned about holding a life across the long, dark 40,000 years is a great deal of time, and I had already lived longer than I had any right to. But I lived long enough to see the edge stop moving. I lived long enough to stand on a Sephir world that should have been pulled apart, and watch its sun hold steady in a sky that should have been empty, and know that it held because two halves of a galaxy had finally decided to build something together, instead of letting one half fall. Voron lived to see it too, which surprised everyone, including him. Stripped of his seat, free of the weight of his office, the old creature had nothing left to do but help, and so he helped, quietly, for tens of thousands of years, an ordinary worker on the greatest project the galaxy had ever attempted. He told me once, near the very end of my life, that he had been happier as a fallen high speaker building the seam than he had ever been ruling from the high seat. I visited him once, far out along the seam in the last years I had. He was working a quiet station near the edge of the unmaking, one of the loneliest posts there was, and he had asked for it on purpose. The great crystal body that had once filled a chamber of its own now spent its days tending a single small stretch of the work, measuring, adjusting, holding the line one patient step at a time, side by side with humans and Saphir and Quoth, who did not know they were working beside the creature who had once ruled them all. He had not told them. He did not want them to know. He wanted, he said, to be only a pair of hands among other hands, and to earn his place by the work and nothing else. I ruled for an age, he told me, his light steady and low, and in all that time I never once felt that I had done a single useful thing with my own hands. I gave orders, I weighed risks, I avoided mistakes, and the galaxy grew a little more still around me every year, and I called that wisdom. Here, I have helped hold back the dark from two worlds with my own labor. I have felt the seam answer to my touch. I am old, and I am fallen, and I have never been so content. You gave me that, your people. You took everything I thought I was, and underneath it you found a thing that could finally be of use. I do not know how to thank a people for that, so I simply work, and I let the work be the thanks. I spent an age, he said, afraid of being wrong, and the day I finally allowed myself to be wrong out loud, in front of everyone, was the day I started to be of use. There is a lesson in that. I wish I had learned it before I helped throw your people into the dark. You learned it in time to help pull them back out, I said. Most people never learn it at all. The galaxy that exists now is not the one I was born into, nor the one that banished my ancestors. The council still meets, but it is not the same council. The high seat is gone, dissolved by the younger races who decided no single elder should ever again hold the power to declare a people dead and turn away. New rules were written, and one of them carries my people's name. It says in the plain language we insisted on that no species, however strange or quick or loud or frightening, may ever be cast out for the comfort of the established order. That the things that frighten the powerful are not the same as the things that are dangerous. That a young race that feels too much and moves too fast may be precisely the thing a slow and frightened galaxy most needs. They named that rule after us. I will not tell you the name, because the name is in a tongue that does not translate cleanly, but the meaning of it, the meaning everyone agreed on, is simple. It means, roughly, the ones we almost lost. The day they wrote that rule into the new laws of the council, they asked me to stand in the hall one last time, in a chair built at last to a human size. The same hall, the same high ceiling with its drifting clouds. But the high seat was gone, dissolved and never to be filled again, and in its place was a wide ring of seats where no single voice could ever again rise above the rest. The young races sat there now, beside the old ones, and the old ones did not look away from us anymore. Some of them had even learned to say the word that had been so hard for them, the small word, sorry, though it had taken them tens of thousands of years to shape their mouths around it. A delegate read the new rule aloud, and then it read the meaning of the name they had chosen, the ones we almost lost, and the hall was quiet in a way I had never heard it before. Not the frightened quiet of my first day there, not the awed quiet when the seam first lit the air. This was a quiet with grief in it. The quiet of beings who had finally let themselves feel the full size of what they had nearly thrown away forever, and who had decided to carry that feeling on purpose, written into law, so that no one who came after them could ever pretend not to know. I had spent my whole long life working toward many things, but I think that quiet, that chosen and unflinching grief, was the truest victory my people ever won. It was the sound of the powerful at last refusing to forget. I think about that often, in the quiet time I have left. The ones we almost lost, not the ones who almost lost, the ones the galaxy almost lost, by throwing them away before they had even begun. Voron had it right, that day in the waiting chamber. The regret was never that we came back. Any fool can regret the return of a thing they wronged. The deeper regret, the one that took an elder of the council 800,000 years to understand, was the exile itself. Everything good that those long ages might have held, all the help and the building and the closed seam and the saved worlds, all of it had been sealed in the dark and very nearly lost forever, because the powerful had decided that the unfamiliar was the same as the dangerous. We were not the danger. We were never the danger. We were the help they almost threw away. I have only a little time remaining now, and I find I do not mind. I have seen the edge stop. I have seen the seam hold. I have seen a galaxy that once carved my people's death into stone learn to write our worth into law instead. And I have learned, across a life longer than any of my distant ancestors could have dreamed, the one thing that the oldest powers in existence never managed to learn, though they had every age in which to learn it. It is this. The measure of a people is not how long they live or how slowly they move, or how much they fear the unfamiliar thing at the edge of the dark. The measure of a people is what they do when they finally hold every advantage. When the cold math says walk away, when no one would blame them for closing the door and saving only themselves, we held every advantage. The math said walk away, and we reached back instead, toward the ones who had wronged us, and we helped, and we asked for nothing. That is the whole of it. That is what we became, in the long dark they forgot about. Not a power to be feared, a people who, given every reason to